This is the Beesotted Pride of West London post-playoff final podcast. And we're coming to you from a completely brand new location because we thought it's time to change things up a little bit of feng shui, as they say. And so we are actually in the Magistrates Court down Brentford High Street. It's called Verdict. It's a little cafe, a lovely little cafe. The guy here, Aaron, who owns it, he's a lovely bloke. Come in here and say hello. Say Beesotted sent you as well. But like I said to you, in the Magistrate Court down Brentford High Street, Verdict, and we're sitting here and we are pontificating. We are hanging out after probably 10, 11, 12 days after we lost to Fulham, the F word, in the playoff final. We went away. We chilled out. We thought about it, or we didn't think about it, and now we've come back and we feel a little bit better about the situation. My name's Billy Grant, and like I said to you, I'm sitting here. I think this is where the judge must have been sitting. He must have been handing out all sorts of fines in this right spot right here. And Laney, do you feel judged?
I thought you were going to say, is this the first time you've been in a magistrate's court? And the answer to that would be no. But
It's certainly not the first time I've been in this magistrate's court, I can tell you that, but we shall move on.
Naughty boys, I don't know. I'm all right, mate. I buggered off for a week. I went to Greece and I drowned my sorrows. Now I needed a bit of a change of scenery anyway. Been a very, very good boy in lockdown, and I needed to just get some R&R. So I kind of put that Fulham night a little bit out of my system by doing that. So I'm looking forward to talking about it again in a kind of perverse way, though.
I mean, we're going to talk about it again, but you know, that night it's another playoff loss, and these things are hard. As a football fan, if you're really, really into it, they're very hard to get over. I mean, this is 10 days or 11 days later now, you know, nearly 2 weeks later. I mean, what did you do to kind of get your mind off it, or just thinking back on what happened then, you know, that you actually feel probably a little bit better about it, or maybe you don't?
I don't think I feel better about the defeat at all, to be honest with you. I think it helped that we weren't there in the end. As a losing finalist, it helped. We didn't see any Fulham fans to kind of rub it in. The fact that it was a local derby, because there weren't fans there, it didn't quite seem as so intense. And you know, I escaped within 48 hours and kind of really did put it out of my mind. Coming back and kind of remembering the night ahead of talking about it today, you know, this morning on the podcast, I don't remember a huge amount about the game itself. I think that's going to be eradicated. We'll talk about the game itself. I think there's circumstances that it's going to make it feel a lot easier. The fact that I don't think ultimately we were good enough to go up. I think we were probably the second or third best team in the division on our day, but those days, because of the the inexperience of the team and the fact that we had a lot of points to catch up on and that kind of like mad scramble to reel everyone else in, it took its toll. So on the night, I think, you know, it could have been a 0-0 all the way through, and could have been penalties on another night, and it took a Jarzy free kick that was taken in a wrong position to break the ice. But you know, I think ultimately, if I'm being philosophical, if there was one season, if you could choose it as a fan not to go up, it probably would have been this one, because we can't go to any of the games probably for a good half of the season to come. So if we do go up to the Prem, I'd actually quite like to be there and see some of the games. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be tough to take. I'm not necessarily going to put a brave face on it just for the hell of it, but you know, I think there's a lot to be excited about for the new season, and that's going to be here before we even know it. So I think that will help us get over it, because we're going to be back in football mode.
Listen, we're all dealing with it different ways. I know the Allard as well. I mean, I know that you are a man of pontification, and you have been pontificating quite hard quite now. And have you actually managed to kind of get your head around this loss? And are you feeling a bit better about it?
Yeah, I suppose I am. I mean, you're never going to be happy straight after the game. You're sitting there, you're involved, you've invested a lot into it, and and after the game we just sat there, and I think we had a few drinks and we listened to some New Order, and that, you know, and that kind of helped to some extent, and then a decent night's sleep. And I think the way I've put it now is that for me there were two sort of minor miracles. Well, they weren't miracles actually, but there were two unusual things that happened at the end of the season. One is we won 8 games on the spin, which was bonkers. That doesn't happen very often. And then the other thing is we threw 3 opportunities to go up away, and I kind of think they balance each other out. If the first thing doesn't happen, you don't get the opportunities. and I don't think you'd really expect either of the two to happen, but that is the way football plays out sometimes. So I kind of have come to the conclusion that, you know, it is just one of those things. I'm not going to give you, it wasn't time for us to go up, you know, we'll be better not going up. I don't really buy that, because I think the financial rewards of going up were so massive that there can never be a time not to go up, if that makes sense. So I'm not really buying, you know, I don't buy that. I think we might be better equipped if we go up next year or the year after, quite possibly. So I kind of buy that, but I'm certainly not gonna tell you that, you know, really it was better we didn't go up, because I don't buy that at all.
Not at all. Listen, and I've got great pleasure actually to welcome to her first ever podcast. We've been trying to get her on for ages and ages. Jo Whelan, who actually, just to give a little intro, it's her fault actually that I'm probably doing this, and you see me on the terraces and do all the Brentford stuff, because Jo actually took me down to Brentford years and years ago when we were playing football on Marlborough football pitch in Isleworth, and she just lined up a load of kids down the high street, walked about 15 of us down the high street, talked to some character called Paddy on the turnstile, said, "Paddy, can you get us all in?" And she bunked us all in over the turnstiles into Brentford Football Club. And after that I was a bit like, whoa, this is quite wicked, and I became a Brentford fan. So it's all Jo's fault, so you can blame her. So Jo, it's your fault that we have gone through this misery yet again, and you've had even more misery as well, in a way, haven't you?
Yes, indeed I have, after being with my other half for 28 years, who is a Fulham fan. I hate to say it, but, you know, I love him and that's it, but he is a Fulham fan. And it's been hard to take for me. It's, you know,
No, he's a good bloke.
Yeah, Chris is a good bloke.
For a Fulham fan.
Yeah, and you all like him, which is good. And he handled it a lot better than what I had done. If I had won, I would have been going absolutely mental, jumping around our holiday home. But he took it all in good stead. But what he's doing now we're home, is every time I come downstairs, there's a rerun of the match, and we didn't even watch it because we were away on holiday.
And that's the thing, you watched all the games. I mean, he came down to the Globe with us as well, and he was in the garden, and he was watching all the games, ironically, as a Fulham fan, in the garden with us as well, until it came to the final, and then you decided to go away.
Yep, we decided to go away. The holidays was booked because we both worked all through the lockdown and everything. And we also made the decision that we were going to have a barbecue on the beach and not watch the game. I think I would have come back to London had it been against Swansea, but against Fulham, I just thought, no, I'll stick with him. He didn't want to watch the game because he knew that we were favourites to win. Everything, the success, it was all for Brentford. Fulham were like the underdogs.
Was he scared?
Oh, he was shitting a brick. Absolutely. He just knew it. He was going to get absolutely thrashed. But unfortunately, something was on the other foot that night, wasn't it?
So, how did you find out about the result? Did you follow it on your phones, or did you just wait and look at the result?
Well, I'll tell you, Chris is a gambler. And we were sitting in the chalet, we were in by then, we were sitting in the chalet, and I don't know if you know, on gambling apps, it always comes up 10 seconds before, and by this time it was like 10 o'clock, and we thought the game would be over, so our phones were off. We didn't even have our phones on, because I get updates all the time. And he put the phone on, and just as he put the phone on, he went, "They've scored." And I went, "Who?" And just at that moment, my phone went beep, beep, and it was like Fulham 1-0. And I just looked at him and said, "Fucking hell, no way." And that was it. I was just sitting there. I didn't know what to do. And he just went, "Sorry." And I went, "What you sorry for?" I said, "What are you sorry for?" And I said, "Turn your phone off, turn your phone off." So then we turned our phone off till about 11:15, and then obviously the final score come up, and that was it. So we didn't even watch the game.
I'll tell you something, you're a better person than me, because there's no way I could have gone through that match without watching it. There's absolutely no way in the world. It would just be too much for me.
Is it Jo's fault that you were on the Jack Whitehall show last night as well? It was about plucky losers, ironically, the whole show, and then they showed the England defeat in the last World Cup, and there's you with your head in your hands, minus your trilby.
Tell you something, somebody messaged me actually. Paul Holland, to be fair, messaged me. I was actually watching that Paul Whitehall, Jack Whitehall show. I was actually watching it, and then I thought, tell you something, I'm not really feeling this. It's all about losers and about kind of like, especially after the playoffs. And I literally switched it off, and literally, as I turned it over, actually, I went to watch the news instead. And then literally as I turned it over, I got a message going, you're just on the Jack Whitehall show. And I just thought, oh, that's typical, isn't it? Blah. And I didn't think it, but I didn't know what it was about. But I think that probably sums up, as a Brentford fan, what this is all about losing.
It was just ironic. It was a whole programme about plucky losers and kind of like how ingrained losing is into our psyche as a nation. But like obviously under the microscope with a Brentford head on, you coming up and being Brentford related, it was just like perfect timing, really.
It's totally unbelievable. I mean, for me, it's really weird because I was, again, we went down and I have to go back and say that, the lockdown period for me was brilliant. Because the fact is that it was such a dark time, but this was a bit of an outlet for us. So, we had so much fun, making the arrangements, going down the pub, sort of meeting up and chatting and seeing all mates and just having a bit of a laugh. So that was all good, as far as we're concerned. And I was just thinking, we could have been like a Blackburn fan or a Reading fan, Could you imagine going through that lockdown as being a fan like that? At least we got some excitement out of it. So I really enjoyed it, really enjoyed the sessions down the pub, really enjoyed all the banter that we had, loads of sort of kind of banter on the phone, WhatsApp, whatever it may be online. So listen, we can't knock that out at all. Going down to Wembley Stadium with my daughter just before the match, walking down there, walking around the stadium, taking photographs, taking her out for a little bit of a, little ice cream and a little bit of a little bit of Sunday, around the stadium beforehand, like maybe what you would have done on the day, just going through all those things, you can't take any of that away. And then we came to the match, which was great. And also, Marcus Bean was in the pub with Captain Mark Phillips, as we call him. Two ex-Bees was in there supporting their old club. They're all in, ex-players in the pub. I think Sam Saunders was around the court. So there was a really, really, really good and positive atmosphere. But I have to admit, when it got to about sort of 70 or 80 minutes, I was actually thinking to myself, I want this to be over. I want this to stop, because it was getting to the stage where we weren't anywhere like what I thought we were going to be like, and it could go horribly wrong. And I just thought, I want this to end. It was the pub was most silent I've seen it for all the matches. People weren't like going beforehand; they were cheering, but only Jason, who'd be listening to this now, he's the only person who was singing and trying to get everybody else up. But everyone else was too nervous, and there was just silence in there, and everyone was feeling a bit sick to the bone and probably thinking, this isn't actually this enjoyable, because you're not there. We're not playing very well. Fulham look like they can have us at any time, and we just kind of want this to just end. Let's just score a goal and finish, or let them score a goal and just finish. And I think when they, and we'll talk about it later, when they scored, it was just a horrible feeling. So to go away, afterwards I came back, social media was minimal, didn't talk very much about football, didn't talk about football at all, and I went away to Brighton for a few days. It was brilliant, just getting away in the sun, just hanging out, family and just chilling out and everything like that. And I think it's just enabled us to come back now and have a slightly more kind of perspective on the whole situation. So when we can talk about it, we could actually talk about how they played, and we're going to talk about it a little bit later as well, about how the Brentford played, how Fulham played, how things may or may not panned out. So I think it's been a really good thing, and I think as Brentford fans we're real experts, as you say, in losses, just probably as England fans are as well in this country, in the fact of not getting victory. And here we go again. But we've got a massive podcast on here. We've got so many things to talk about after being away for so long. It's trying to squeeze 3 shows into one. So we'll obviously be chatting about the playoff final against Fulham. We'll be hearing what the fans had to say after the match as well. We'll also be asking where did it go wrong for Brentford. We'll ask the opinions of a load of football experts. We've got football experts lined up, and they're going to tell us why Brentford didn't quite get over the line. We'll be talking to Ryan Dilks from the Second Tier podcast. We've got Caroline Barker from Sky Sports. We've got Marcus Bean, ex-B as well, who was in the house, who was in the Globe watching as well. All these guys are going to be giving us their thoughts on why Brentford didn't quite cross the line. Plus, we'll also talk to Ted Knutson from StatsBomb, and we'll be listening to a clip from the full podcast interview with Ted, which is going to be out on Pride of West London on probably about Wednesday, which is the 2-week anniversary of our loss to Fulham as well. So you should check that out. Ted Knutson, fascinating guy, knows his numbers, knows his football, and we had a good old chat to him, and we're going to be playing a clip from that later on in this podcast. Also, we'll be harking back a little bit. We'll be asking, was this Fulham loss really that bad? We did a little poll, and we asked lots and lots of fans, where did this defeat come with respect to all 9 Brentford playoff defeats, which was the worst and which was the least worst, and there's 9 of them, and we went through that. We'll be talking about that as well, which might actually make people feel a little bit better. Plus, we'll also be taking a brief look on what is happening in and around Griffin Park on and off the pitch. But anyway, we got loads to talk about. We're going to have a little twang, we're going to have a little bit of tea, a little bit of a break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about Fulham and that playoff final. So Brentford got to Wembley for the first time since 2013 when we played Yeovil in the playoff final. We had finished third that season. We were gutted because we, as you know, we'd missed a penalty in the final minute. Doncaster scored, they went up and we didn't. And we went to Wembley that year. We felt it was justified that we should have gone up, but we didn't. We lost to Yeovil that year, we finished 6th, absolutely gutting. This season we went to Wembley again in the playoff final. We finished third. Fulham finished just below us. We finished on equal points, to be fair, so it was much more even between the two. But Brentford was the side where, when we came into the lockdown, we were on fire and no one wanted to play us. But some people might say that we stuttered a little bit as we came to the end. But we finished off on a great note against Swansea, and we went into that match confident. But in the end, it just didn't quite work out. Fulham 2. Brentford 1. Yes, we did score a goal in the final seconds of that match, but Fulham undid us in extra time with a free kick, which has gutted a number of people. Listen, we've discussed this amongst ourselves, but we thought, first of all, as well, let's go over to a few people that we respect their views, some footballing experts out there, people that talk about football all the time. And we spoke to Ryan Dilks from the Second Tier podcast. This is what he had to say about Brentford's loss against Fulham.
I thought the playoff final showcased 2 defences that were particularly sturdy, but going forwards, that wasn't really the case. From a Brentford perspective, I think the defence, probably in themselves, 7 out of 10s, but the midfield and forward line wouldn't give them more than a 5 out of 10. I thought Matthias Jensen in particular was particularly poor, and the front 3 just seemed too worried about doing something wrong, and they didn't want to take a chance and really create something. So I think that's where it's gone wrong for Brentford. Next season, I'm still very optimistic about their chances of getting promotion. One of the main reasons for that is because the Championship next season is looking a bit weak in terms of standout promotion contenders. This season, you could have picked 5 or 6 teams who could have got automatically promoted. Next season, there's not a standout favourite, but I'd put Brentford as my favourites. I know Ben Rama, Watkins likely to leave, and there may be 1 or 2 others who could go as well. But if they manage to keep that core side together, then they're still one of the strongest sides in the division. And when you consider Tariq Fosu's coming in, he'll be a direct replacement for Ben Rama, I imagine. And as long as they can replace Ollie Watkins, then I think Brentford will be good enough to go again next season.
So that was Ryan Dilks from the Second Tier podcast, and in effect he said that brilliant defence, but your midfield and your forwards were on fire, and he picked out as well Jensen in particular. Fair comment, do you think, Laney?
Yeah, probably. There was a lot of Brentford players on the day that just didn't perform to the standards we hoped they would. To win that game, we all knew that we needed our players to be at the top of their form, and you couldn't kind of have half the team playing 5 or 6s out of 10s, with only 1 or 2 players, like 8, 9s and 10s. So it was always going to require Brentford to be in the kind of like rich vein that we'd seen in the early part of the post-lockdown matches, but Fulham did a number on us. They pressed us. We had to go long again in stages during that game, and we know that we that's not really the way we want to play. And it did appear at times that we were trying to kind of head to grabbing a late winner. I think we escaped with our lives early on a couple of 3 times where on another day Fulham could have been 2 up at the break. I thought second period we played better, and I think you're right what you said. At 70 minutes we were like wanting it to be over. And during extra time as well, I thought we played okay in extra time, but it looked like we were just like edging it there and hoping we would get one chance to break through, which went their way. But I remember sitting there in the garden with my post-lockdown crew thinking, what's going to happen? This game has to be decided tonight, where's the breakthrough moment going to come? Is it really going to go to penalties, which I kind of flippantly joked about beforehand, and I just honestly thought it might go our way. We just might have ridden our luck in the early part of the match, and we might get a lucky breakthrough, but it just didn't. And we can squabble over, whether the free kick that it was a great moment of inspiration that he spotted Raya, too far off of his line, or sort of like to the middle of the goal and curled it in, But I just think, if with VAR in the finals, I think the VAR should be there for the playoff semi-finals and the final itself, because the free kick was 10 yards further forward than the foul happened. So, on another day, we get that break.
Again, and we talked about this on the Ted Knutson interview as well, which you can, like I say, hear on Pride of West London. It should be out maybe a few days after you listen to this one. But just coming back to that, because it's interesting, this wasn't actually pointed out by, I didn't notice it on social media or anywhere else at all, actually. It was only pointed out by somebody within our own group who pointed it out about a week or 10 days afterwards, and it's almost like nobody noticed it. What exactly is this point that you're talking about here, Laney?
Where the foul happened and where the free kick was taken were two different points on the pitch, and the free kick was taken way forward from where the foul.
How far?
Well, according to the tweet, I mean, again, I've not gone back and studied the game, but he reckons it was 10 yards further forward. 10 yards further back, that ball, it can't be hit with the power to go in like it did. So I mean, you could say we're clutching at straws, but it's actually quite a big moment in the game. It's like, along with goal line technology, it led to a goal. So any incident that leads to a goal should, I think, be scrutinised at a game that's got such magnitude for the national game. It's imperative that the results that we get in these playoff finals are 100% squeaky clean, if they can be. And you're right, no one else picked it up, but that's what VAR would have helped identify. People in an office or in a studio, looking at every angle, and you could say looking for a reason not to give it, but that is making sure that there's every reason to give it. And we are clutching at straws slightly, but I think it's an important factor.
What I will emphasise, though, was what I did quite like after the match is that Brentford lost that game, and we say fair and square. There wasn't the case of blaming the referee. There wasn't the case of blaming anybody, which I think was quite good. Brentford fans, on the whole, turned around, put their hand up, said they lost that. And even the Swansea game, when we lost that game, even though the referee was blamed to a certain extent, we didn't pin it on that. We didn't pin it on that. And I think this is what's really good, is our acceptance as to knowing how good we are. We know how good we need to be to win certain games, and I think with this game, we knew that we weren't good enough. The fact is, though, however, even though we weren't good enough, the point I think is that game could have gone either way if the referee had decided to give us that decision, which wasn't given to us. But we're not sitting down there moaning as other fans, and I'm not going to mention their name, but I think you probably know who I'm talking about, would have done if that decision was given against them massively. We're just saying, listen, it is a point, and it's a fair point you've made, Laney.
Yeah, we are, but there's a lot of Brentford fans, and I'm not saying right or wrong. I'm not saying it's us versus them. There's a lot of Brentford fans saying we bottled it, and we always bottle it on the big stage, which is it's a valid argument. So we're saying that we're not crying our eyes out and bitching, and we've got a philosophical head on. But there is a counter argument to that, saying that Brentford once again they shit their pants on the big stage.
And again, we're going to the Ted Knutson interview, which I said there'll be a little clip of this a little bit later, and we talk about that quite a lot. But also the full interview, really interesting. And like I said to you, definitely check that out. He's a big statistician. He also knows a lot about Brentford. He knows a lot about football as well. The Allards. Listen, we're talking about Ryan Dilks' views there about the midfield and the forwards who weren't quite on their game that lost us. Do you agree that?
I think it's. I think you can make that argument more so if you don't watch us play regularly. I think to be honest, I'm still going to go with the Fulham did a job on us. They did not allow us to play through the midfield, and you can say Jensen wasn't in it for the first 20-25 minutes, but he wasn't in it because he didn't get the ball, and he didn't get the ball because no one passed to him. That's a simplistic way of saying it, but Jensen isn't the player that goes out and wins the ball against Swansea in the second leg, you saw Jensen on the ball more. He had more space and he had more room, and that was because Swansea weren't doing the same job on us that Fulham did. In the first 5 minutes, we had to go long twice to Watkins, and I mean proper long, like hoofs towards him rather than decent balls through to him. That Jensen ball against Swansea that he played through to him, nothing like that opened up. We were going long to Watkins. We went, and I've just looked back at what I said. We went long 5 times in the first 15 minutes, which is probably 2 or 3 times more than we do in a game normally in terms of a hopeful hoof up to him. And that's what Fulham limited us to. And unfortunately, I recall sitting there thinking we are proper up against it in this game. I think, like you say, we know when we're playing well, and we know when, and I don't know it's about not playing well when we're not allowed to play well, and maybe it's somewhere in between, because we've got to work out how to play against these teams. But I think we all knew, and this is why a lot of people we know haven't been sort of shouting the odds about the Fulham game, is because we know that wasn't a performance that necessarily deserved a Brentford win, is the point. I'm not saying that we bottled it, I'm just saying it wasn't a performance that deserved a win. The same against Swansea in the first leg when we were all relatively philosophical about it. Swansea in the second leg, we saw a performance where if you lose that game, then you're spitting, because you know that game we deserve to win, and a couple of bad referee decisions in that game that goes against us, and you're properly spitting. So I think it was just one of the. It was fine margins, and in the end, the fine margins fell Fulham's way.
Joe, I know you didn't see the game as such, but you talked about the fact that you've got to earn it. You talked the fact that also, especially with a Fulham other half who's been playing the game back, about Fulham doing a job on you. And also you saw the semi-finals, and you saw previous matches where we didn't quite get to where we were meant to be. Your thoughts on Brentford overall going into this final? Did you, in retrospect, see this coming?
I think so, yeah, because sometimes we're just not consistent, and you have to give the 100% and play like we can play all the time. You've got to see how these teams are playing against us and change our game if we need to. If Jensen's not getting the ball or our midfield is not working well, do something about it, but do it earlier.
So we didn't quite get the result that we were meant to, but listen, we could talk about that as much as we want to, but listen, we've got football experts, as we say, people who we trust, who are giving us their view. Caroline Barker from Sky Sports also watched the match, and this is what she thought about Brentford losing to Fulham.
Hello, I'm Caroline Barker, and I'm found hanging around the EFL for Sky. What happened? Was it pressure? I don't know. I likened it to that first bit after lockdown. You were like Chris Akabusi in that 4x400 metre. No pressure, seeing it all in front of you, and yet you just gradually close them down. But in truth, it was a remarkable run, and no one likes that. No one likes that, we would have taken that prior to lockdown. But it was. Some of the football you played under Thomas had us all salivating. I'm sad for you, I'm sad for the fans, for Griffin Park. It was all teeing up. But maybe look at it another way. You wouldn't have wanted to have not been there for the Premier League at the new ground at the start. Who knows where we'll be when it kicks off again. And I can't wait to see what Thomas pulls out for next season. Him, that tactics board. I know there's worry about who stays, but you've built before, you will again, and his brand of football is a joy to watch. I just wanted to say, as he can't edit this out, thank you to Billy and the team. Your podcast is always and will always be invaluable. I think it's just one of the many fans podcasts that don't get enough credit for the insight, the humour, the essential listening. So thank you. And if there's a positive for next season, we'll all get to hear you talk EFL.
So I love Caroline Barker, actually. She's wicked because she's on point. She knows her football all the way down from non-league football, where she started, all the way through to the EFL. And she's got a great little spot there on Sky, and she knows what she's talking about if you listen to her. So thanks, Caroline, and thanks for your support. She's got friends on both sides, as you know her really well, but also the Fulhamish camp as well, so she knows how gutted we were not to win that. Chris Akabusi, though. Chris Akabusi, we were described as a younger, you probably don't remember Chris Akabusi, but he was a bit of an athlete, wasn't he?
Yeah, he's like he's an iconic GB athlete, and he always had a perfect timing. So yeah, there's others. You know, I always thought Mo Farah was another brilliant one. He always got sat on someone's shoulder right until it suited him, and he knew that he had the skill and the stamina and the finishing pace to get him over the line first. You don't often win races by leading from the front, and you know, I just ultimately we just ran out of steam, Bill.
Yeah, I think you can go to the cycling sprint races on the circuit where nobody really wants to lead it out. It's almost easier to be the person coming from behind, exactly what we were for the 8 games where we chased it down, and then it switched and we became the favourites, we became the cyclists leading it out, and at that point it's only really the greats that can nail it leading from the front, and maybe we just weren't quite there.
Also, after the match, we also spoke to the fans. We normally do this after the match, right after the match, to hear the fans' views. We decided it wasn't right to put it out straight afterwards because everyone's hurting too much, but it's interesting to hear people's views straight after the match, a week or so after the event happened. This is what the fans had to say straight after the match.
Tonight was a real tense affair, I thought, and like we've been here before with the playoff finals and the semi-finals and all sorts of nonsense, and I thought if we got off to a good start and dominated early, we were going to win the game, and it didn't happen. And Fulham really took charge early, and I thought Parker got his tactics, to be honest, spot on. He made changes. He made a more like defensive, industrious formation, and they really dealt with us. And it made it really hard for us to attack and flow, and that made it a bit of a shootout. And all my group were talking about it's going to take a moment of magic to win the game, and that's what happened. The free kick was a moment of brilliance. We've done our best and we've tried our hardest, and we've just been outdone today, and I think we did. And I hate to say it, but I think the best team won. I think the best team won the game, and I can live with that. And I still stand by the club. I think the Bees are doing amazing. This isn't the end of Brentford, of course. It would have been lovely next year to go into it, but it's not to be. Next year, in September the 12th, first game of the season might have been Liverpool away. We can't go. Second game could be Man United at home. We can't go. Third game could be Chelsea away. We can't go. So, listen, as lovely as it would have been to go up tonight, like, obviously we wanted to, but I think next year we go into the season a strong team. We will lose players, but we'll earn money from them, and the squad will get better and bigger. And I think next year we are a strong team. We'll be one of the favourites to go up. We'll be in a new stadium. Listen, this is not the end of the world, mate. You know, fair play to them. They won the game. They outplayed us tactically. They done great. But I can live with that. But we're still moving forward.
This game is gutting, but it's kind of not gutting in a way, because I've been to other games where I've been really gutted. Brentford games, England games, where I felt that we were not justified in the result, and I felt really hard done by. You know, things like I was there at Italia 90 when England played Germany, and I felt we should have won that game, and we didn't. We were down penalties. 96, I was there behind the goal again, England penalties, Germany. I thought we should have had that. So many games that I felt, that we could have had it. You know, Doncaster, you were gutted, but this game, even though it was one of them ones where I just thought, tell you what, after about 75 minutes, I was thinking, listen, if we lose this, it's not as if it's been a bad one, because we didn't really deserve to win.
You know, you look back at all these matches, and like you say, you can sit there and think about games where you think we so deserve to win that was ours for the taking. But if I'm honest, if you look at, we should have beaten Stoke at home. That would have given us a chance against Barnsley. So, second leg, we were fantastic against Swansea. But you knew tonight that it just wasn't for us this evening. And I think maybe that's why, as much as we kind of thought, we were only 20 minutes away from Premiership, maybe it's not our season. We've got a nice new stadium coming up this season. We'll enjoy that for a season, bed it in, and then we'll go up as champions next year. It's all about the supporters. It's always about the supporters. You know, whether, you know, you went Cardiff away, QPR away, whether you've been at a home game, the fans, we've been through a lot, we've seen a lot. Teams, different managers, players, stadium, all the changes, but the fans are so passionate. You know, this evening we're all sitting in the Globe, and we have been for the last couple of matches, and you're seeing the same faces, you're chatting. See someone with a Brentford shirt, you can have a chat. There's something about Brentford fans, you know, it's right to the core. Most passionate fans in the world, really are.
Yeah, I think, you know, respect to Fulham, they got their tactics right. Scott Parker got his the positional play of the players. They neutralised our attack. They bossed the midfield. I don't think we really froze. If we did, we froze only at the beginning of the first half. I thought we played quite well in the second half. We'll be back stronger. We'll be back next season. Yes, we will have to sell players, but we will replace them. And we'll have that extra maturity, experience, maybe even professionalism that we need. 367 days ago when we played Birmingham, we lost 1-0 when we dominated the game. We were 15 minutes away from possibly being in the Premier League. So that's a huge positive.
The agony of the playoffs is always for me. I've seen every playoff defeat that we've had, and although it doesn't reflect on this team, you've just always got those feelings in you. And I just wanted to see us win a final. I'm not even that bothered about a Premier League. I just wanted to see us win a final. Quite a lot of people are now seeing us as we're not just little old Brentford or a little thing. They're taking us quite seriously, and you know, they're talking about us in a way like we were. They expected us to roll over Fulham tonight. We've never ever been in that position where we were expected to win, but we're actually being talked about. We're not a small club anymore. We're a team who are going somewhere, and they're really taking notice of these things. I think a big positive is that, and I think most of the fans that you'll find now, although we've had this great thing and we think that some of our players will leave in that, I think most people will turn around and say we've got faith that we're going to get better players again, and we're still going to challenge.
The idea of like being in the Globe, experiencing it with your friends, and I think the realistic thing that we need to say is now, if anybody has any idea what's going on, that this could well be the new normal for the next 6-7 months. And actually, that is a great thing because we're with great people. We live in that hurt, we've been through this, we've done it before. And I think what's been different to any other time is that I've sat here now, I sat after the game, I shed my tears, I had my 20 minutes to really console myself and get over it, and then I just started thinking to myself, and what I genuinely believe more than anything is I believe in the system, I believe in the club, and I think we are on an upward curve. I think this is just getting better and better every year. There will be a lot of naysayers out there saying that like we bottled it, we've blown our chance, but for the past 6 years we've just been getting better and better and better. And what we do as fans, we get caught up in the moment, we get caught up in the heat of it being Fulham, the chance of the Premier League. And I think what we don't realise is actually that Matthew Benham wasn't looking at today as being the be-all or end-all. He's already looking 2-3 years into the future. The club as a whole are looking forwards. And I think out of a lot of the teams in the Championship, we are in such a special position right now. And if we can keep getting better 10% every year, we will eventually get to the Premier League. And when we get to the Premier League, it'll be a completely different ball game. But until that point, we will just keep doing what we're doing and didn't just sink everything in on a punt. We're not that team. And okay, we didn't go up this season, but next season's going to be better. If we don't go up next season, the next season will be better. And we've got 2 or 3 more years to really see where we can get. And I'm so excited about that.
We finished the highest we ever have in 70 odd years. We got an amazing team, we got a fantastic manager, and I just believe that with a good wind and something's going to change, and we're going to get there. We're going to get there. We're going to have to do it the hard way, like we always do, but we're going to get there, Bill. We're going to get there, mate. I believe it.
Bill, we're bees. We're fighters. We never give up, and we'll always be positive. I was still proud of the boys today. I know they didn't pull it out of the bag, but we're going into a nice new stadium, and we'll fight to live another day, to get in there and go through another season we're bees. Come on, Brentford, up the bees. I love you through and through. Come on, Brentford. We mustn't be down. We've got to think positive all the way. We've lost, but our spirits are still high. We'll keep fighting, Bill. We'll keep fighting.
George, yeah, I was so down, and after the Stoke game, the Barnsley games, but I think there's something about this club now that we seem to sort of bounce back. We seem to enjoy the adversity. I want to prove a few people wrong, and I think the last month has been a great advert for the club. For players, everyone. I don't know if Ivan Toney or whoever. We'll have to rebuild the squad, but we are the footballers' team in the Championship. If you want to come down and play like Corinthians, if you want to play this amazing, have a go, knockout football, then we are the team, and I look forward to it. And I will not miss not being at Wickham and Rotherham and Coventry the same way I would really miss not being at Man City or Arsenal or Liverpool. And I thought I'd be a lot more down, but actually, in the grand scheme of things, if someone said to you, you were 20 minutes away from the Premier League, you know, with this club, with Thomas Frank, this novice manager, with Matthew Benham, you know, there's this guy, this gambler in charge. We've done it, and we've done it so early, we've done it so quickly. And I'm optimistic. There you go, Bill. You got it out of me. I'm optimistic.
I have to look back and say it's the most successful we've been. We finished third in the championship on merit. And yes, it hurts tonight. It really bloody hurts tonight. But we finished third in the championship. And looking at the teams coming down next season, it's almost unbearable to think about next season at this point. But we've got to be positive for next season. We've got a great owner. We've got a great manager. We've got such a good system for running the club. We have to be positive. We're going to finish top 2 next year.
And that's interesting, listening to the fans. And one player who's a fan who was watching the game with us as well, Marcus Bean. I mean, this is what he had to say. He was particularly gutted because he's also working quite closely with Brentford at this moment.
Marcus Bean. Brentford would always hold a special place in my heart because it was a club that rekindled my love for football. My thoughts on the final, listen, I was bitterly disappointed like all the fans were, and it hurt, and just kind of recovering from that now and looking forward to the future. But I just felt that on the day that they handled the occasion a little bit better than us. They've got a lot of experienced players who have been there in those situations, and I think I've said before that I think a lot of the times those games do come down to, are you able to handle the emotions and just play your usual game? And some players just didn't quite do it on the day. And that's not to say they haven't been fantastic throughout the season, and they've been brilliant. And I just don't think that we can really be too harsh on anybody on that result. And as I said before, I'm really positive about the future and now. And despite one or two maybe leaving, I know that as a recruitment department, which I work in, you know, how hard we're working behind the scenes to make sure that we replace them with players that can do, you know, at least as good a job, if not better. That's the model, and that's what we've got to try and do, and I'm positive that we can do that. I'm really looking forward to the future now.
So we're getting all sorts of opinions here, but the question was Thomas Frank trying to be too clever on the day in the way that we played, or was it a tactic that just didn't quite come off?
I think if you revert to it once you've seen that Fulham aren't going to let you play, and it's basically about being tight at the back and taking anything you can, I don't think that's being too clever. I think that obviously makes some sense, but I don't think you can get past the fact that if we'd have come out swinging in the first 10 or 15 minutes like we did against Swansea, the game would have been played out in a completely different way. But the reason we didn't do that is that Fulham didn't let us.
And it's interesting because this is a conversation that we had, or part of a conversation we had with Ted Knutson, who's a statistician for StatsBomb. And he knows his stuff, to be fair. He worked for Brentford for a while, but he's worked for a number of clubs since then. People have started to get into the analytics game within football. We spoke to Ted for over an hour, and you can hear the podcast on prideofwest.london in a few days after you hear this. But we've got a little clip of our conversation with Ted Knutson from StatsBomb talking about the Fulham playoff final.
I'm the CEO of StatsBomb, which is a sports data company. We provide the best data in the industry as well as visualization on top of it for recruitment, for opposition analysis, and for team performances.
Okay, and you work for many different clubs as well, almost like as consultants. Is that right?
Yeah, so spent 2 years at Brentford and Midtjylland, and then came out of that and looked around for my next job. Started up my own company, realizing that kind of Moneyball was going to take off in the space. And it was still pretty early, which is kind of interesting. I felt like the stuff we were doing at Brentford was fairly well known, but it wasn't until 2017, 2018 where we really started to see the data shift in football. And so we've worked and consulted with Europa League and Champions League teams all the way down to League Two. And we sell to something like 50 customers right now. So we are seeing this, really take hold in the football world.
From your point of view, from someone who looks at stats, can you sort of judge the season? Can you break it down as to whether it was a successful season or the season was a failure, or does it sit somewhere in between? How did you view the season for Brentford?
Best Bees season of your lifetime. You may never see a better Bees team than this. And that's me having watched a lot of games, but it's also factually true as well. Made it to the playoff final, made it within minutes of actually doing something else. And when we look at the stats and the data, it's a very significant, impressive season. It's really different from the Dean years, or even the Warbs years. The difference became that Brentford were extremely good defensively. And then the attack was mostly powered by, high-fueled, very talented players. But, from expected goals perspective, they didn't score, buckets and buckets. And if you take away that 7-0, there was a 5-1 against Hull. And then, some 3s and some 4s in there. But, that's great for the championship. But it was the defense that powered them on. But I think that, this year, you kind of got to just love this season, despite the fact that it ended that way. And then, if you come back 12 months later, or 5 years later, in some cases, you'll be very nostalgic toward it.
I guess the next question comes is where did it go wrong? Can you put your finger on where it went wrong? Was it by not getting automatic promotion? Is it just the luck of the last 30 minutes of the playoff final? Where would you say it went wrong, or is there a deeper message there?
The second Joe Bryan goal, not the first one. No, so there's a thing about Brentford choked, right? Brentford had to win 8 games in a row to get in position to quote unquote choke, and that just gets lost. People are they could have not wanted any one of those points and then not been in that position. They had a huge heater as they came back from the break, and were great to watch. And, for me, I look at it, and that's just the timing of things makes people think that the storyline is there. But throughout the course of the year, it's interesting. If you think of the Birmingham game that kind of started off the season, that had an 18-meter header that was scored, which is I think literally the only one outside the box this season in the whole championship. There's some bad luck involved in that. But credit to Fulham at the end, and I know that's painful, so I apologize for saying it, but credit for Fulham at the end for looking at David's position and realizing that he was a little high up. But the real one that sealed it was the second Bryan goal, because the Bees scored late on, and it would have gone into penalties at 1-1, and that one was a magnificent play. And if you rewatch it, as painful as it is, that's a great fucking goal. And there's no way that your left back should be up there in the box at that point. No possible way.
Yeah, that's true. Just look at it overall, because again, from Brentford fans' point of view, I know that you said that we've had the time of our life, we've had the best season. Interestingly, all the way through the season, we were second in the, you've got the charts, which you put your stats people, we were second, stroke third, but, for a lot of the time we were second in the charts, which meant that they always felt that we could always take that second place. We were always going to be up there. So in effect, the season was going to plan. So the fact that the season went to plan, then after we went into lockdown, and then we still kind of, we went from fourth to third, to place, so we didn't quite get there. Does that mean, as far as you're concerned, the season was a success for Brentford, even though we didn't win the playoff final? Or is the playoff final the kind of ultimate?
Yeah, promotion's the goal, right? So if you only look at your goals, you would say that Brentford failed a little bit. Third best team in terms of points and goal difference. Second best team in terms of expected goals. Leeds were the only one that were better. Came out of the gates a little rough, as sometimes happens, but some of that was just poor luck. And right up against a Barnsley team that got a lot better after they changed managers, and that late goal kept them up. Incentivized there. It wasn't like they were playing somebody whose season was over. I have to look at it from a process perspective as this was a success. As a goal perspective, you fell just a tiny bit short.
And Thomas Frank, it's interesting because you talked about Dean Smith, and again, what we're doing is that we're using you, Ted, because you've just got, you've got much different knowledge to what we have, and it's not kind of pointing fingers at anybody saying you're bad, you're good. It's just kind of just getting more of an idea and probably making us feel a little bit better about having lost to Fulham in the playoff final. Thomas Frank came in, and there were a number of changes, as you said. You talk about the defensive, you talked about, we scored more goals than we've ever scored before. What was the difference, the main differences between Thomas and Dean?
Thomas's defense is just much tighter, and it's not just aggressive pressing. It's that systemically they were tighter. They disrupt passing lanes and they break all the time. And the break all the time is something that we set into place very early on. It's something we wanted to do. Warbs also did it as well. Like when you have fast front men that can run, and you've got midfielders that can pass it to those guys and get them going as quickly as possible, like that is an edge, and that's something that happens there. But Thomas's group was just much more defensively stout, and Norgard was also like a big upgrade, and one that we wanted from 2014. Douglas and Toombs, not the most mobile of players back in 6 years ago, especially as they're coming toward the end of their championship careers. And finally Norgard comes in, and he sort of solidifies all of that, and it was really good to watch. I can't believe that Rico played every game. So I'm looking backwards at like what we wanted back then and seeing where they're at. But the reality is Thomas was. He instilled a much better, tighter defense, made it so that the Bees only had to score one or two in a lot of these matches in order to come out on top. And that was probably the difference in their place in the table as well.
Just before, you bring Fulham back in, Ted. Can you break down the Fulham game and say what Fulham did well against us? Because, like you've already said, my personal opinion is it wasn't that we choked. Fulham just did a job on us that day. Where do you stand on that?
Best game I've seen Fulham play in ages and ages. Having watched this league in 6 years, super closely, and they were different than that first restart game that we beat them late. But Harrison Reed was tremendous in that game, and he was the switch. Like basically when they took him off, then the Bees were able to get some traction and start to run, and scored that late goal as well in the restart game. In this one, Fulham disrupted everything, like absolutely everything, and Brentford couldn't run, and that's a thing that happens. Set pieces didn't do much either. I weren't giving up many set pieces. There were just so many kind of inside passes, not quite in the final third, but in the Fulham half, where they go to start play and then nothing happens. Like it just gets disrupted, and then Fulham go into possession, and Brentford can't aggressively press because they know it might go into extra time, so they got to save gas in the tank and stuff like that. So it was a really good game plan, and they executed it extremely well.
Do you think they could have, say Mitrovic had been fit and he'd have started the game, could they have executed the same game plan?
Probably not. I don't think Mitro plays that game. I think there's also the worry that he's going to get a second card at some point for being Mitrovic. Being John Malkovich, being Alexander Mitrovic, also a very good head study. It fits perfectly. So I think that Mitro would have, and Mitro wasn't super useful when he came on either. But I think that Pontus and Pinnock both handled him quite well previously, and so that would have been absolutely fine.
There's kind of an irony, isn't there, that a lot of people were happy that Mitrovic wasn't playing because he's their top scorer, but possibly that sort of laid out a route that Fulham could take into the game that actually really disrupted us.
I think the rumour was that Reed was nursing an injury, and that was the one that I was hoping for. I was like, if he's not in, then at least this should go a little easier through the centre of the pitch, which means that Brentford might come out on top. And look, there was nothing in this game. They were both really good. Bees struggled a little bit. Nerves were there. First 30 minutes especially, I thought that were a bit chancy, but they settled into it. And then, things happen, and a little bit of magic, something that the coaching staff scouted ahead of time, and Brian performs. But that second goal is the one that you're just like, wow, where did that come from? And if that one doesn't happen, then it goes into penalties, and who knows?
Sometimes, do you think that maybe that even though we got these magical players, you also become so over-reliant on them that if they don't perform, it kind of can really knock you back for six, and especially if one or two or three of them. So, say, for example, Ben Rama can't do those little skills. Like, if Josh De Silva has an off game, if you've got two or three of those players having an off game, you might say they didn't have an off game, they just would stop them playing. But from the Brentford fans, because we've seen the way that these guys play, even if somebody kind of blocks them out, they could find their way around it. But we just seem to have had a situation where, yes, there was a bit of nerves, but also the players weren't quite on their game. And if they're not on their game and we rely on it, that stops us from being a 9 out of 10 team and makes us more of a sort of kind of 6 or 7 out of 10 team. Would you agree with that?
I think that sometimes you have to credit your opponent. And that's like not just part of being like a good winner or loser, but it's also like part of football. Like sometimes teams do a good job against you, and yeah, it sucks. And the bit of magic thing, it's like collective magic. Yeah, it's not just one player many times. It's multiple players that are contributing. Like that Jensen pass for the goal against Swansea. Like that's the pass is what makes that. Like, but if the run isn't there, then like that never happens anyway. I think that sometimes we get lost in that. But the nice part about having multiple players that can create magic is that sometimes they create additional magic above and beyond that. And the thing that I would say is like look at PSG, one of the biggest teams in the world last night. They spent an awful long time waiting for Mbappe's period to come back on, where Neymar was creating magic by himself, and it was magic. He was unbelievable last night. And people will just lose it because he didn't score those 2 goals where he's in front. Most expensive player ever in the world that just didn't happen to finish 2 chances that looked like they were really good chances. Well, hey, even the very best players of all time don't always do this type of stuff, and we're still in the championship, and we have some great players, especially for the level. But factually, sometimes you credit your opponent because they were really, really good.
And if you talk about opponents, there were 2 other key games, of course, that we didn't come out top on. And I don't know how much you followed these games, but the Barnsley game and the Stoke game, where do you stand on those games in terms of crediting opponents versus Brentford missing their opportunities?
Yeah, so Stoke were actually good all year, but didn't kind of come good and get the results until the end of the season. And Brentford fans should be used to that because Brentford had times where they looked like they were in, the bottom 6 of the table, but reality was they finished 9th at the end of the year. And, which one is the real Bees or real Stoke during that period? I don't know. And the Barnsley game was helter-skelter. Both of those teams needed a result. And they played like both of those teams needed a result. And at the end of it, Barnsley got it and it kept them up. And it was a huge difference for them. And it was super painful for Brentford fans. But they got to do it again in the playoffs. And that ended up super painful as well. But, they still... Yeah, I don't know. If you go back to the beginning of the year, you look at this Bees team and you say that you had 81 points, you finished 2 points off of automatic promotion, you had the best expected goals in the league, you had a great attack, and you had the second best defense, and you say, would you accept that right now as you get to go into the playoffs? They would all say yes.
One thing that we did notice, and it's funny because it's not been really picked up, and also as Brentford fans, we've actually really resigned ourselves. We put our hands up and said, listen, Fulham, better team, better tactics. They did us on the day. We're not bitter about it. I think it's been easier for us because we were behind closed doors, to be quite honest with you. We were actually in the pubs rather than the stadium, so it's made it a lot easier. But we've put our hand up and said, fair enough, we won the battles against Fulham. We've beaten them every time at Griffin Park at their place, but they won the war at Wembley. So anyway, but they did something quite interesting because when they got that free kick, okay, the time they got their free kick, we didn't notice. That's when Mitrovic, I think, came on. He got substituted. He came straight over, nutted Marcondes. There was a bit of a kerfuffle going on with him. Yellow card should be a red card. So that was happening. Whereas no one actually noticed that. I think Brian took the ball up and put it forward 10 yards further than it should have been where he took the kick. So that free kick would have been 10 yards further behind. Now, we were asking the question, is that basically why Mitrovic was sent on? To get a yellow card, cause a kerfuffle, get them a bit earlier. And are these the kind of experience that we're missing as a side which is still quite young and quite green, and we don't quite know how to do these little tricks?
Coaches literally could have just told them, which is what they told Fulham players to do. It's nothing to do with experience. It's just about like finding the edges at the coaching level and then getting the players to execute.
I think it'd be good to talk about the future because, listen, we didn't get promoted this season, as we know. We came very, very close. From you know, as a professional in the game, Ted, you're very impressed with Brentford and you're not thinking that they're going to be going anyway. You know, just looking at the future, you said that we're going to lose, you know, at least a couple of front players. We're thinking that we lose 3, maybe even 4 players. How is that going to affect us?
Yeah, I think that it's challenging. Like, and often it doesn't happen the first year that you have to rebuild, right? Often it's the second year that you start to excel again, and sometimes it doesn't go perfectly. So I think Ali goes. I think Saeed goes. I think that Rico might go to a Premier League team that wants a speedy left back that can defend. The Bees have done a great job in doing this over and over, and as long as everybody sticks around at the top level, you gotta kind of back them to be able to do it again. I think that Brentford have historically been really good at rebuilding, especially in certain places. And centre backs, they've been remarkably good, which is a tough place to recruit. Goalkeepers is a fucking crapshoot. Sorry for my language there. I'm having flashbacks to goalkeepers past.
Yes.
And then, but the forwards, they're always on top of it. And I think what's happening is like you'll see teams extract a little bit better price, but Brentford will have a lot of options lined up there. The question is, how long does it take that to gel? But if Thomas stays around, I talk to people still around the team and some people who work in Matthew's organizations that have a pretty big impact over the years. And they've been really impressed with what Thomas has been able to do with some of the players, including De Silva. And so if Thomas is around another year, and that's a little bit of a risk as well, but I don't think the Premier League has any high-profile job or even medium-profile jobs that are open right now, then you've got a good chance of him taking those players, building them up by the end of the next season. Even if they're not at the automatics, they're getting into the playoffs and they're frisky and they play a good style. And maybe they add long throws and get a couple extra goals. I don't know.
So really, really interesting chat there with Ted Knutson. And there's a few things that he said. I mean, first of all, he said the error. We asked him, where did it go wrong? And he said it wasn't the first goal, which obviously we all know that was a massive error there for Araya, who's been brilliant all season. But he said it wasn't that one. He said it was come from the second goal, because when that second goal went in, and it was a great goal, it absolutely killed us off. And he talked about, players being out of position, us trying to get that, trying to get the equaliser, and it didn't quite happen. Fullbacks being up the pitch, and you can kind of see where he's coming from, because if we hadn't got that second goal, we were still in the game.
Yeah, and scoring so late. If we were going to get a goal at any stage, you would want it to be like 5 minutes before that. It just didn't give us a chance. It was good that we didn't lose 2-0, but I don't think it eased the pain. Maybe one day I can sit and watch back that game and kind of be a little bit more kind of knowledgeable, really, about how things panned out. But really, I think we were just all gutted in the garden, and no one. So the TV went straight off. No one wanted to watch Fulham lifting anything. No one wanted to watch any experts playing the game back and giving us any kind of real retrospective kind of insight. People just wanted to drown their sorrows, I think, and that's where I'm kind of at with it still. But it's good to hear some intelligence and some sort of semblance of kind of authority over why the game panned out as it did.
And the same thing happened in the Globe as well. Television went straight off. Nobody saw the celebrations. Nobody saw the post analysis from the experts. But the interesting thing is that some people said to me that, to be fair, a lot of the experts at Sky put their hand up, saying actually Brentford, we were wrong about them. We laughed about them when they sacked, or not sacked, but Warburton left them, in the 2014 after the last playoff campaign. But because we didn't understand what they're about. But now we put our hands up, so we got it wrong. We understand what they're about, and they didn't feel that this was going to be the end. The Allard, this point about the error on the second goal, but he also said a few other interesting things, didn't he?
Yeah, we asked him a question, and it was kind of based on something that I've been thinking about Fulham a bit, and also an interesting article that Tony Cascarino wrote, which I think in a way, and he wrote it before, I think maybe the day of the playoff or the day before, where he said that if Fulham are going to play sort of a high press against us, then they will struggle to do that with Mitrovic, and that's a fit Mitrovic we're talking about rather than...
Mitrovic.
Fitrovic rather than the unfitrovic or Fatrovic that we saw come on in the sort of the dying embers of the game, and it's a question: if Fulham had Mitrovic fit, would they have been able to play the way they did? Ted basically said no, and would that have led to a completely different game? It's not guaranteeing we would have won, of course, but it's an interesting topic that it was almost, the lack of fitness of Mitrovic that forced Fulham. I suppose also having seen the way Barnsley played against us, Swansea maybe in the first leg as well, but that put this sort of idea that Fulham would have to approach the game in a different way. Fulham's way hasn't been over the season, has really been get the ball to Mitrovic, can he stick it in the back of the net? But this was a very different Fulham, and they basically defended from the front against us.
And also, another point he said is that, because we're really gutted and we're trying to pick holes in Brentford to a certain extent to make ourselves feel better. We said, look, is there something that we did? Was our team not right? Did they, were the players not firing on all cylinders? And he actually just pointed towards Fulham, and he just actually said that, well, actually, Fulham were very good. And he said that Fulham actually, played the best that he's probably seen them play in a long time, didn't he?
Yeah, I think he almost said it was their best performance of the season, and it took their best performance
in years, I think he said.
And it took that to beat us, and it was still very, very narrow. Like we said, Ted said it's the second goal that was the killer, and I think we obviously all know that. And I think what Ted's trying to say is that he felt we still had a goal in us, and which we did in the end, and by thinking we had a goal in us at 1-0, anything was possible.
It was as well. And again, we're not harking on what we've got to talk because we're speaking to a stats man here as well. The XG, as it was, Brentford came out on XG. We had better chances. I think we were just over 1.5 and Fulham were just over 1.16 or something like that. So, as chances go, it was better. So that's why it was a tight game, which would have gone either way. They got the great goal that they scored, but also in effect you could say it was a lucky goal because it could have gone either way. It's 4% chance of actually that going in the back of the net, that free kick that they had, so it could have gone out, hit the crossbar, gone wide, anything else could have happened. Fair play that they scored, and after that, you just never know. So it's one of those things where you keep saying things like it's small margins. Sometimes I hate that phrase, especially when you lose, but it is small margins. Sometimes you want to sort of try to find a bigger excuse, like we weren't good enough, we weren't hard enough, we weren't tough enough. But when you actually look at it in the cold light of the day, it is small margins like that gives them the advantage, which makes them win.
Was there a delayed reaction in the pub because we were all watching it from the same angle? We weren't watching it from different parts of the ground, and I didn't know the ball had actually gone in until maybe like a second or 2 seconds later on. I thought you had the really random, simulated crowd noise, and it was all seemed delayed. And I don't think even the commentators believed that it had gone in from there.
I said, oh no, straight away, and it looked like he sort of did this ridiculous. The dive looked really ridiculous, and they went down, and I went, oh no. But a lot of people just did stop, so there was a stop. Then afterwards, it's like a real confusion. I don't know what you're saying with you.
Yeah, I felt the same. It was a sort of, you saw this scrambling from Raya, which gave you an idea it was close. And then I didn't really think it had gone in. And then suddenly I looked at what was going on, and at the corner of my eye, I see Fulham celebrating, and you just think, oh Lord, because I guess you can't really, you couldn't really hear the commentary and stuff like that, and the crowd noise you couldn't trust. I think there was a moment earlier in the game where Fulham hit the side netting, and there was sort of a cheer that suddenly died down and stuff like that. So, it was. There was a second or two of confusion until the actual oh no.
One thing I will say though is listen, Fulham, they're the team that I want to beat most in the whole world, and this is quite gutting that we didn't do it. As you say, it's probably better that it happened when we were inside the pub as opposed to inside the ground, because I couldn't think of anything worse. I was travelling home down Wembley Way and on the tube with all these Fulham fans and all that. However, listen, they are my biggest rivals as far as I'm concerned, but to be fair, the first person that actually sent us a message afterwards was a Fulham fan who said, look, I'm really gutted for you. Listen, you wanted to win it really badly. It didn't really happen. And Fulham fans, on the whole, I think have actually been really gracious about the victory this time. And I even got a message from a Fulham fan who, sorry, I don't have your name. He messaged me via Instagram, which I don't use as much as I should do, and the message disappeared. But he said something like, you guys have been really brilliant. I listened to your podcast a few times. I thought Brentford were really brilliant. Everything that you've done is really great. I feel a bit gutted for you. I'm glad we beat you. But he was really, really gracious. Don't even know this guy as well. And I thought, listen, fair play. Tip me out to them. I'm not sure whether or not also they're being maybe a little bit gracious because they know that this battle isn't over as yet. As far as I'm concerned, this has only just started. They won it. They won a little bit of a war, but they know that we're still going to be coming back. We're not slinking away. Brentford are going to get stronger and stronger. So I think the Brentford Fulham thing is going to happen again. So don't you worry about that.
Fucking hate Fulham.
Lady's not happy, but listen, what we're going to say is that we're going to just talk after this little twang about a little poll that we had about previous playoffs, which may make you feel a little bit better or worse about what went on at Wembley against Fulham a few weeks back. So, I mean, listen, gutted as you may be of losing the playoffs, but then we thought, hold on a second, this is 9 out of 9. We've lost 9 playoffs. And I thought, just to make me feel better, I just thought, hold on a second, how badly does this rank against all the other playoffs that we played in? Then I started to sort of write them all down, and then when I wrote down, I thought, actually, to be quite honest with you, I don't feel bad compared to other ones. So I put it out to a fair few people, and we got a really good response back from people out there. We didn't put it to the whole world because we didn't want Fulham fans actually kind of sort of writing in and sort of putting them as number one, sort of kind of get it all rigged. So we've did it, but like I said to you, we got a really, really good response back from Bees fans, and the interesting thing about it is that out of all the 9 playoffs that we had, and we can go through all of them, the one that came top as the worst playoff final loss out of all of them, and it's not about the way that we played, it's just about how you felt as a fan and linked to certain things, was Huddersfield. Without a shadow of a doubt, Huddersfield was the top one, the one that people remember the worst. And also we had a good range of people as well. We had sort of kind of young people in their teens going all the way through to kind of 50s and 60s as well, so we had a really good range of people in there, but that's still ranked as the worst playoff final loss. Again, the second worst, interestingly, was Fulham. So Fulham was the second worst playoff final loss as far as people were concerned. Yeovil was the third worst playoff loss. Stoke City in 2002 as well was the fourth worst playoff loss, and Crewe, Alexandra in 1997 as well, was the fifth worst. Then after that it was all a bit woolly, it was sort of a bit of Borough, a bit of Sheffield Wednesday, in sort of 2000, I think it was 2005, Swansea in 2006, and then the one that people least were worried about was Tranmere, the first one in 2009. So, I mean, I thought that was quite interesting. I mean, what I'd say is that the Fulham one started off being sort of nowhere near, but then after it picked up a little bit of speed. So I don't know whether or not people sort of, when they started to compare things, but it's also talking about the reasons why people did it as well. Huddersfield, what was noticed is that the 4 or 5 top ones, which are in the list, were all finals that people felt that Brentford deserved to have gone up, and it didn't quite happen. So it's how do you order that one? And then the ones after that were the ones where probably Brentford didn't deserve to go, as in whether or not we finished 6th and we just snuck in, or whether or not we just played really rubbish, as we did against Swansea, and we just had no chance. So I thought that was kind of quite interesting. Middlesbrough, actually, the semi-final, because also you've got to think about some of the people who are young enough to not remember things like Tranmere or Huddersfield or even Stoke City, but we had sort of over 50% of the people who remembered all the way back to Tranmere as well, which I think was which was quite interesting. We had and also 15% their first semi-final of their first playoff loss. Their first playoff loss I remembered was Huddersfield, and then it was Yeovil after that. So we had people that kind of remembered all the way through. Now Middlesbrough was the second highest number of least worst behind Tranmere. So it's almost like that Huddersfield semi-final, even though we lost it and we were gutted, I think that people sort of saw it as a bit of a celebration, probably the fact that we just kind of, not to say didn't deserve to be there, didn't expect to be there. We actually played very well throughout that season, and also there was a bit of a party up in Middlesbrough afterwards for the people that kind of were in there as well. So I mean, that's quite interesting. I mean, those results, Laney, I mean, what are your thoughts?
I hated doing this. It's like putting a list together of your favourite funerals you've ever been to be honest with you. I thought it was like a bit nasty of you to ask the question, but true. It's good to put it into some sort of order. For me personally, I felt Fulham defeat, actually I've taken all right. It's almost like it's down there with the Tranmere one probably. I'm still on a bit of a high that my club finished third in the second tier of English football, and we won loads of brilliant games this season. Doesn't make it any easier to accept the defeat. I think the worst one for me was, I'm on the Huddersfield one. There was an injustice. You're right. Where there was a real big injustice in the season, where we've been leading the division pretty much all the season, and we'd been robbed of automatic promotion pretty much. So I think Stoke at Wembley, at Millennium Stadium as well. That was pretty awful. We'd had a long day out, and it was a long journey back as well. And I imagine that. I remember that getting really aggy. I think Stoke at the Millennium Stadium, because it was a long, horrible journey back as well. So Huddersfield gets it for me though.
Initially I thought Huddersfield, but I think maybe there's a little bit of retrospective in this, is that the Stoke game was horrific, mainly because you knew that the club, that basically that team was finished. That was their last throw of the dice. You knew probably that Koppel was going to leave, so that meant Owusu was going, Gavin Mahon was going, Koppel was going, and I'm sure there were some others as well. And I just couldn't really see how we could bounce back from that and have anything to show for it, and which is exactly how it turned out. It sort of ripped the heart out of the club for a period of time. Maybe on the night it was Huddersfield, it was the first time I'd really experienced anything like that. It was horrific. I did go away to Tranmere, but I just think we were glad to be there to some extent. You know, there was a fleet of 50-odd coaches went up to Tranmere that day, which I remember. But Huddersfield sort of hit me really, really hard. I think by the time you get to Yeovil, you're starting to become a bit numb to the whole thing, and it was pretty horrific. But you become a bit numb to it. I think with Fulham, the difference with Fulham is that I still think the club's on an upward trajectory. I don't think we're going to, the club isn't going to fall apart next season. Most of the key players are still going to, when I say players, I'm talking about the club in general, not the ones on the pitch. The key players are still going to be involved, and by that I mean the owner, directors of football, the talent spotters. Hopefully, I think the manager. Yeah, we might lose a few players, but we've brought other players in. Next season, it might start a bit difficult with the transfer window, and that will be an open. But that's why I don't feel quite that way about Fulham. For sure, it's the biggest prize we've ever missed out on. There's no doubt about that. But I still go back to the Stoke one. That ripped the heart out of the club, and we didn't recover for a good many years.
Well, for me, unfortunately, I disagree with all of you, but Yeovil was my worst one. I think after the Doncaster at home and that penalty miss, we were all gutted, absolutely. You know, even now I remember how I felt that day. And then we get to Yeovil, get to Wembley, playing Yeovil, this little team from non-league a few seasons before, and we're going to do it, and then they beat us. And you know, I can remember sitting in the pub outside Wembley, meeting these Yeovil fans, and they were even saying, we're some tin pot little club from down southwest. He says, and you're a London club, you're going to do it. And to this day, that is still my worst memory. Huddersfield was bad, Crewe, Stoke, all of them. But for me, definitely Yeovil is my big number one.
It's interesting because you can look through the comments as well, and we're going to probably put this into I really should do, get yourself motivated, to put this into an article as well, which you can actually read it, because I think people have put some really interesting comments as well, and it'll make you feel better. You know, they put Yeovil hurt us the most, as we should have gone up with the Doncaster penalty. So that Doncaster penalty incident, I think, is a big thing with certain people. You know, some people saying, losing to Fulham was tough only because they felt that, we were ready and we were like the best team, that they've ever seen. And I think that was a difficulty as well. Losing to Fulham was hard as well, but I think it's the quality of the team and knowing that we could have actually done it, as opposed to looking at previous teams like, the Swansea, maybe the Sheffield Wednesday games, when they feel that we couldn't have done it. Lots of people talk about the Huddersfield game mainly because, that was a season when only one team went up, and we finished second that season because of the rejig of the Premier League. So we finished second and Huddersfield finished fifth that time, and they beat us on penalties. And I think it was the first time that Brentford were actually a really good side that season, and we looked like it's the first time in my lifetime that we were actually going to do anything, and I so believe that we're going to do it. And I think, as a young fan, the heartbreak that you get when certain things like that happen, probably as people might have had if they're young and they went to the Yeovil game, or probably even for this Fulham game as well, so they can equate that as well. But like I said to you, we're going to put a lot of this up on Beesotted.com as an article, so you can read it in and around this podcast and also the Ted Knutson podcast, just to give a little bit more context as to how this loss fits in and around all the other Brentford losses.
Well, I will say, looking back at all the previous ones, their defeats while we've been knocking on the door to get into the second tier, the last two, the Middlesbrough and obviously the Fulham, we're getting used to now knocking on the door to get to the top flight. So the standard and the bar's been raised. It's going to be more difficult, and I just hope that with some of the previous playoff defeats, we're able to bounce back the next season and put it right, like we did at Yeovil. The Yeovil experience was a horrible roller coaster. You'd had obviously the Doncaster bar, then you'd had Bristol City, where we had a real sort of nail biter back at Griffin Park, and then obviously the defeat at Wembley. So hopefully we can put it right next season.
Fingers crossed we can put it right. Listen, we're going to talk about many more things. What's happening in and around Griffin Park, what's happening on the pitch, what's happening off the pitch, are there transfers, there's all sorts of nonsense that's going on. We'll talk about that, and then what we'll do is we'll just come back after that and just talk about a few little positives after the final. So the one thing about the Swansea game, which is the playoff semi-final, it was the final game at Griffin Park. But what the fans wanted, or some of the fans wanted, they wanted to see Griffin Park for the last time, because obviously we have not had the opportunity to go back there and see Griffin Park because, the rug was pulled underneath us due to COVID. And it's not anybody else's fault, nobody's fault there at all, but we thought that, the club thought we need to rectify this. So, to be fair to the club, they put an event up for the fans so that they can actually go back to Griffin Park and they can pay one last visit to Griffin Park. And tickets went out for fans, season ticket holders, members, whoever it may be, to go out there to visit Griffin Park for the last time at the end of the August. It has to be said, it hasn't quite gone according to plan though, has it, Laney?
No, it hasn't, and to be fair to everyone concerned, we are in extraordinary circumstances. I think probably all the ticketing staff are still being furloughed. I don't know that for a fact, but in an ideal situation, the whole season ticket holders, applying for slots and tickets for the one last goodbye would have been done through the ticketing system. Whether that was not possible because of the staff not being around, I don't know. It looks like we've used kind of Eventbrite, which is proved problematic. So there's a lot of fans, season ticket holders that weren't. I've personally have still not even received my email to invite me to apply for a ticket. So obviously I'm not very happy about that. Not so much for me. I'm happy to have said my goodbyes at the Sheffield Wednesday game, but I know that's not the same for everyone. My son wanted to go back; he's not got an email either. So I know there's a lot of season ticket holders that are kind of like upset. And then on top of that, you've obviously got the ticketing situation. On top of that, it's emerged that seats have been taken out of Griffin Park by surprise to maybe not to the people that have made the decisions, but to a lot of fans that were expecting to go back and to see Griffin Park for one last time. I don't think that one last time included kind of looking at a skeleton of a stand that had been kind of semi dismantled. If they'd have taken all the seats out in the new roadside and said we're going to recreate a terrace, and then they could have disguised it under that, taken all those seats out first, then they probably would have got away with it. But the fact is that especially where the seats have gone, it looks like they've donated them to non-league football clubs, which is a great gesture overall. But the timing of it is kind of a bit dubious. If you're going to invite all your fan base back, or your most loyal recent fan base in terms of them being season ticket holders, to kind of see or sit in their seat for one last time, you're opening yourself up to a lot of upset and offence ultimately if the seats aren't there. And we all know the ground's going to be ripped down. None of us are looking forward to seeing that, but that should have been done out of our eyesight, and will be. Once you said goodbye, you can kind of park it. It's like saying goodbye to a relative, and it is like that to a lot of people. It is very much like that, saying goodbye to a relative that you know is going to die, and you see him for the last time. And that might sound dramatic to some people, but to a lot of fans, that's exactly how it is. And you'd like to see them as they are, not with an arm cut off. I just think it's unfortunate, some of the decisions and the timing of some of those decisions. There's a few fans that have been kind of like really hard as nails about it. Well, would you expect? You don't expect the place to be mothballed forever. This has got to be done. Blah blah blah. Yeah, we know all of that. We know the arguments about moving stadium. It's not about any of that. It's not about like, can we keep Griffin Park? All that's we know what's done is done, and we know we're moving to a new stadium for the start of next season. None of us expected some cryogenic storage of the old ground, and we could walk around there any time we wanted. It's coming down, and it's going to be sad to see. But for one last time, Brentford fans wanted to see it as it was for the Sheffield Wednesday game. Maybe with the fans' pictures still there, whatever. But it needed to be damaged in for want of a better word, and that's not the case. And I think it's very, very unfortunate, and I think some fans are very, very upset, and rightly so.
I can't disagree with any of that. It's just a complete shit show.
Again, you know me, I do my devil's advocate thing where we don't know what the scenario is as well with regards to the club, you know, what obligations that they may or may not have had. So, you know, that's going to be thrown into the bottom. We haven't had the chance to actually call the club and ask them for a comment in this one. I think this is more of a comment from seeing what's been people have been saying online, seeing what people have been saying in certain conversations, and, you know, just basically emotional views, just like what we have the emotional views with fans directly after a match when they're sort of thinking, you know, we've lost 3-0 when we should have won 4-0, you know, and this is what our views are. So I think that the views at the moment are now that, you know, maybe the club should have waited for at least maybe a week or 10 days before they actually gave those seats away to non-league. I know, Joe, I mean, like I said to you, you brought me to Brentford, Griffin Park. I mean, it's got a massive, you know, place in your heart. You know, you used to go for years, you used to go home and away, up and down, all around the country. You knew characters plenty as it was, but you weren't actually going to go back to see Griffin Park for the last time, were you?
No, I've made the decision. I want to remember Griffin Park as it was, you know, the 5-0 win against Sheffield Wednesday. And to tell you the truth, who wants to walk round an empty ground anyway, and albeit with seats missing now? I just want to remember it as it was, the good times. For me, part of Griffin Park went when the Royal Oak came down anyway, so, and like different stands and whatever, but yeah, I just want to remember it as it was, full. And if I had to go back one last time, I'd want it with some fans in there for a proper goodbye. But we all know that we can't do that.
And this is a conversation for the future. I mean, you know, Brentford, we know they've had to move on. Everyone's had to get their head around it. I mean, are you actually looking forward to going to Lionel Road? Is it one of those things that you're sort of thinking, look, it's been coming for so long, kind of just get it over and done with?
Yeah, I think so. I was one of those in the beginning, you know, I'm a bit old school, as you keep saying, Bill, but I never wanted to move from Griffin Park. It's unique, you know, totally unique, but I obviously live near Kew Bridge, and where I've seen it grow and being built and everything, I can't actually wait now to get in there, albeit 4,000 or whatever, however they're going to do it, but I'm really looking forward to seeing us play there.
And it's going to be interesting because, I mean, this is so weird. I mean, we've had a 10-day break or something like that, so we can chill out after the playoff final. But already, you know, we're talking about, you know, next week, next Friday, the fixtures are coming out for next season, which is going to start in about 3 weeks' time. I mean, this has just gone so mad. This whole period is just so much. Like I said to you, I really enjoyed the lockdown football and the post-lockdown football, even though we didn't get the result we wanted to. But to be fair, I could have actually done with a little bit of a longer break, to be quite honest. But on the 20th or the 21st, Friday the 21st of August, the fixtures are going to be coming out. It's going to be a shorter season. There's going to be more midweek ties, and obviously we've got 6 new teams to play. A bit surreal, Lane, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really surreal. It's good that they're going to try and play catch up a bit to try and get the natural patterns of the seasons back as close as they can. So hopefully this new season that's about to start will finish kind of May or June, and the next season after that will be an August to May one again. So yeah, that's important. I will say, while talking about Griffin Park and saying goodbye, you may have seen online I'm going to update the Griffin Park book, which will include the final 3 seasons and then obviously the final games, and there's some really excellent new material that's going to go in that. There's a couple of articles and pieces. Jim Levac has written just incredible farewell Griffin Park poem. If you want to get your name in the book for the reprint, I'm probably going to extend it to the end of this week coming. I'll put all the dates actually online, but it's been really popular, and there's lots of fans that want to get their granddads and their great granddads names, because when we did the original naming book, the stadium was still going to be around, but it's kind of like now that the power of the actual, what the significance of what's happened is kind of is hitting. So it's important, I think, for as many fans to have their names in the book as they want. If you bought the original copy, your name's going to appear in it automatically. You haven't got to do anything. No one's trying to get you to buy a second copy of the book. If you want, it's going to be a very limited edition, and it's going to be different in terms of format. But so I'll do that on Twitter and do that online. So if you want to get your name in it, or remember a fan of the past, there's an opportunity to get their name in there.
There you go. The Griffin Park book, which is going to be out very, very soon. Like I said to you, everything is all coming together. Like I said, the new season is coming together, which is not going to be in Griffin Park. It's going to be in New Griffin Park, as we call it, you know.
When are we going to find out what it's called?
It's called New Griffin Park, as well. Yeah, that's what it's
Well,
called.
should we agree?
Yeah, it's agreed. Yeah, New Griffin Park. So the Caribou Cup is meant to start on the Saturday, the 5th of September. That's the week before the season starts. That's actually international weekend. And then rounds 2, 3 and 4 we played on consecutive midweek dates, starting of the 15th to the 16th of September. That's when Premier League sides come into the competition. So basically it's going to be going all the way through and sort of rattling through. So we'll almost have the cup finished by sort of like the end of October, which is a little bit mad. So the draw for that is actually on Tuesday coming, which is the 18th of August.
In fact, I think that's quite a good idea. If you know, I know we said about exceptional circumstances, but from a sponsor's perspective, they're going to get like a really intense kind of blast of Carabao sponsorship, rather than it being spread out over the season. I can see that making sense, to be honest with you.
And also, I think the FA Cup, from what I can gather, I don't believe there's going to be any replays as well. So I think it's going to be going bang, 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 FA Cup all the way through, just to stop the fixture congestion. So hopefully, like I said to you, we can finish the season by the end of May, because we've got the European Championships, obviously, which was cancelled for last season, which, again, we've said this before, look, fingers crossed, Ollie Watkins is going to be in the side, probably not with Brentford, unfortunately, but in the England squad. So it's going to be quite an exciting period. So, like I said to you, 12th of September is when the fixtures are going to kick off, and it goes all the way through to, again, the playoff final weekend, and I don't even believe I've just said that, is going to be Bank Holiday weekend, the 29th to the 31st of May. So it looks like the season is going to finish again, which is the first weekend in May, the Bank Holiday weekend, which is when it normally finishes. And like I said, much more midweek games. We don't know what's going to be happening about fans in the stadium as yet. They're talking about the idea of maybe fans being allowed back in October. Maybe it's only 5,000 fans might be allowed in. Maybe it's a third capacity. There's all sorts of stuff going on. But we know for a fact that for the first month at least, it's going to be on TV. And we don't know whether or not it's going to be on iFollow, whether or not it's going to be on Sky, where it's going to be. I mean, I'm in a meeting with the EFL next week, actually, and I think we'll be discussing that. I'm not sure whether or not I'll be able to reveal the information straight away, but I'm sure that information will come out from that meeting as to what is going to be happening during the back end of the COVID period as it is, and I'll relay that information to you as soon as I can do. Finally, we're going to just finish off on a little bit of positivity with Brentford. So look, we might not have won against Fulham in the playoff final, our 9th loss in a row. I keep going on about that because I believe at some stage that has got to change. But I don't believe this season was all that bad. I think there's a number of positives to have come out of this season for Brentford, a number of positives to have come out of the playoffs as well. I think for a start, Brentford, this playoffs has 100% put us on the map. We think that everyone has heard about us, but that's not the case at all. There's so many people that haven't heard from us, and I've noticed the difference between when you're even at a playoff semi-final or you're a playoff final. So many people were saying, I'm going to watch it, I've heard about you. People I know that don't even know about football were messaging me going, good luck, Billy, we know this is a really big game for you. I've heard this is the biggest game in the world. My cousins, my aunts, people from around the world, people from Arkansas and Texas and California were messaging me saying, we just saw on ESPN, people are talking about your team Brentford. I'd never heard of them before, so I have now. So I think that this has definitely put us on the map, and even though we lost, I think that it's kind of like we ain't disappearing. So when we come back again, people will be going, oh, that's that team that lost last year, who we heard was meant to win, but they weren't quite good enough. But they're there again, and I think that is a massive, massive positive. Laney, have you got any positives?
Yeah, if you take the final out of the equation and the feeling at the end of that match, you have to be honest and say it's the best season of our Brentford supporting lives, and that's a fact. We played some of the most incredible football. We had some of the best players I've ever seen grace a red and white stripe. Not a blue and gold. Hopefully get rid of that shirt now. Looking back over the season, it was just stunning. We know where the bar is set. We know that if we carry on where we left off over the last 2 months, we stand every chance of finishing the job off properly next season. So the positive is, yeah, it was a kick in the nuts, but I see no reason for us not to be challenging there again next season, and we've got the experience to learn from. So that's a huge positive. We're still the best team I've ever seen as a Brentford fan. So if you can't get excited about that, then you need your head searching.
Yeah, my positive over the last positives going forward is we've got some brilliant players still. 1 or 2, 3 we might lose. But as Lainey said, last season was absolutely brilliant to be a Brentford fan. One of my best ever, and luckily for me, we decided to go and buy season tickets again, only to make sure we're obviously at the last game of the season, and of course it didn't happen, but hey-ho, my last game was a 5-0 win. But I'm always positive, once a B, always a B.
And I mentioned it before, Sky journalists admitting that they were wrong, which means that everyone's starting to understand a little bit more about what Brentford is about now as well. I think that's a big bonus, and the fact that players actually want to come and play for us. So it was a real hassle beforehand. I mean, I know I worked for a small independent record label before, a big independent record label, but trying to sign artists was a nightmare because people thought, why do we go to you? We can go to Sony or Universal or any of the big majors. And so we found it really hard signing players, and we had to set up a style of how we did our music and promoted it, and we were very good at doing it. And eventually down the line we got big stars come in, like Craig David and other people like that, who's actually started to make big hit records. But it's only because of the hard work we did from the grassroots level. So I've seen that for Brentford. They're doing exactly the same thing. It's been hard work, but we've done the right thing, and eventually down the line now people are going, actually I get it. And I think that is a massive bonus, and it's going to set us up for the future. The Allard, what are your thoughts on this?
To be fair, Ted talks about the inevitability of Brentford getting to the Premier League. If we leave the structure in place and if Matthew Benham stays interested, we will be in the Premier League.
Do you really believe that, Matt?
I do believe it, yeah.
So this is the Beesotted Pride of West London post-playoff final podcast. And I feel a little bit better after talking about all of that lot. Listen, we might have lost to Fulham. We lost the battle. But we're not going to lose the war because we're still there and we're still fighting. We're going to come back. We've got a good side. We've got a good setup. Everyone now recognises that we're good. We're going to get some more players in next season, and I really do truly believe we'll be there fighting and competing next season, just as everybody else has said the same thing. Lainey, how do you feel?
Are you suggesting it's going to be a season of bees up, Fulham down, Bill?
I didn't really want to actually kind of go there, Lainey, but as you mention it, I think it could be a high probability that there could be a bit of bees up, Fulham down action going on. Joe, what do you think?
Oh, I totally agree with that. I've already told him indoors that we're going to pass him on the way, and I'll be waving.
We'll all be waving. So listen, have yourselves an absolutely fantastic summer. Don't forget to check out the Ted Knutson podcast on prideofwest.london as well. We might come back to you in a few weeks' time because we might feel like it, after sitting on the beach or whatever we're going to do for a few days, and we think, actually, we need to talk more football. But as it goes now, we're sitting here in the Magistrates Court where I was years ago, but we won't talk about that now. And as we say, because we're Brentford and we didn't win the mid-final, well, it doesn't really matter because we're coming back again in a few weeks' time, and everyone forgot about that. As we say, come on, you bees!